Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to a BPCA webinar today on the principles of controls of moth infestations. Got your friendly webinar face popping up here, Natalie. So good to see you all, or at least see there's 179 or 180 of you now logging on, which is, yeah, again, fantastic. I say it every time. So pleasing to see you all returning. And yeah, hopefully we can get some good information on moth control. Now, just as a warning, there's a lot of information in this webinar today. There's a lot of species of moths in the UK. I've had to pick 3 of them, which we'll go into in a moment. And hopefully those 3 are the ones that you guys and girls possibly come across more commonly. But yeah, I might be whizzing through a little bit, but we'll get to that in a moment. So welcome anyway, bit of an introduction. So while I'm just doing a bit of housekeeping, it's an opportunity for you all to let me know if there's any sound problems or video problems. I said I've got my trusty colleague Kat here, just keeping an eye on things. So if you do experience any sound problems, as always, in the chat section, you can let Kat know and she'll try and advise you on what you can do maybe to make that a little bit more user-friendly for you. If it's a problem my end, then, well, we'll deal with that as and when it comes along, but hopefully we will be good. In terms of CPD, so usual 1 point, 1 hour, 1 CPD point today. We've got a Q&A section at the end, as always. So really important that in the Q&A section, you only use it for questions, and I'll give some hopefully good answers. Again, chat section for technical problems and maybe a bit of chat. You guys might want to share information with each other or make certain comments on the subjects that I'm going to be talking about today. But yeah, just general chat there, but specific questions to me, it'd be great to stick it in the Q&A section. I like to think hopefully I'll be able to answer all of them, but as always, if I can't answer it, I'm not sure of the answer, I'll certainly say that and get back to you with it. Any questions we don't get to, we will I'll get out the written answers to you afterwards. Probably will run over a little bit today, just a heads up to everybody. Hopefully nobody's got a problem with that, but again, because of the content here, going into the questions and answers at the end, we might go over, depending on how many questions you get to me. So we'll see how that goes, but hopefully you don't mind. Good. Okay, just in terms of watching again as well, a lot of you always get in touch and say, oh, I missed the webinar today, or, I've watched it and I want to share it with a friend or a colleague. Then, yep, we will be downloading this. Usually within sort of 24 to 48 hours, we'll get it on the BPCA website and you'll better watch it again. CPD points, you'll need to log yourself, but we can assist you with doing that. As I said, basis prompt scheme or BPCA registered scheme, both of them, if you've pre-registered and you're here with us, 222 of you now, then yeah, you'll get them points allocated. Okay, good. So I'm assuming the sound is all okay. Kat hasn't popped up to say there's any issues. So yeah, let's get going. I'm going to share my screen, and while we're doing that, I'll probably mumble away to you. Oh no, look, that's happened quickly, isn't it? Impressive. Good. Okay, so today, as we said, the principles of moth control for pest professionals, that's a key word here, the principles. This is not an entomological webinar. If you have come along today hoping you're going to learn about the ins and outs of the moth species and their biology, the real detail, the colours of all their wing patterns and so on and so forth, this probably isn't the webinar for you, because fortunately just haven't got time to do that. We do have some other courses though. So we've got a stored product insect in food factory environments, which is an online course. So that's a full day. There's going to be a lot more time there to be able to go into that further detail on stored product insects, not textile pests, stored product insects, but that might be useful for some of you that wanted to do a bit more detailed studying. And also an insect identification, which is a classroom course. I know other suppliers available as well, speech and manufacturers and suppliers, they might be able to provide something as well, but we do a classroom insect identification, which will help with the important task of identifying what pest species you've got. But in this webinar today, we're only going to be covering 3 species. Now, I've picked these out just with an assumption of, the phone calls that I get, the things I've experienced personally as well, and sort of thought to myself, do you know what, we'll do 1 textile pest, we'll do 1 stored product insect pest, and then another moth that is kind of a bit of both, really. So we've got the common closed moth, Tiniella basiella, the Indian mill moth, Plodienus pectella, and the white-shouldered house moth, which is Endrosis sarcilitilla. I said that a bit quickly then, sarcitrella. Scientific names, again, entomologically really important, writing biologist reports, writing detailed studies on any species of insect or rodent or animal. It's really important to use those scientific names for the purpose of what I think, us pest controllers want to know. It's handy to know. And if you can remember them, fantastic. Your customers certainly like to hear that you've got that detailed knowledge. But, common clothes moth, Indian mill moth, and white-shouldered house moth, they're the species I'm going to cover, and they're the names I'm going to continue with. But I will keep popping up those scientific names just so that you can, maybe it'll go into your memory a bit better, and something you can walk away with, hopefully. Great. And then, of course, followed by your questions. Now, I will apologize now. I am going to try and do this as thoroughly as possible and in a way that's going to be audibly satisfying for you, that I'm not talking too quickly or rushing at all. And maybe I could have just covered 1 or 2 species of moth, but I decided 3, and we'll see if we're going to regret that. But we'll hopefully, I've tested it through, and I think I can get through it in time. And as I said, because of that, might run over by 5 or 10 minutes. Hopefully you'll all bear with me for a little bit of time to do some questions at the end. Okay, without further ado, then let's get going. So let me just move my screen. I can't see you guys. Let me move me down there. Great. I'm assuming the sound is all okay still, which is fantastic. So Tinea, this is one of the most important and most damaging species. It's currently, really widespread clothes moth throughout the whole of the world. These moths can cause so much damage and loss of irreplaceable materials of, aesthetic, historical, and scientific importance, as well as damaging, everyday items. So clothing, furnishings, and other materials for pets. So animal fur, wool, feathers, and hides. It can cause some significant problems for commercial and domestic properties alike. It's funny really as well. This is just a general statement with any pest, but certainly with clothes moth, we often ask ourselves, what's the point of, a clothes moth? Whereas actually there you can see also found on dead animal carcasses. It's actually, pretty helpful with the natural degrade of such waste as dead carcasses, of course, as with anything. So they do have an importance, but unfortunately, because us humans have integrated and utilised natural fibres for our own pleasure, so carpets and rugs and clothing and taxidermy and so on and so forth, it can attract what we consider to be inappropriate animals and insects, and in this case the common clothes moth and the web and clothes moth. We've heard that in the last 10 years it seems that call outs have increased. Now that's based on anecdotal evidence. It might be calls into us, it might be articles that other associations or professional organizations have put out there, it might be again you guys telling us that you've had an increase, but certainly we do get a lot of calls, especially this time of year. And it's been with us for a very long time, since the 1800s. And of course, the import and the export that goes on around the whole of the world, just, transport these moths from corner to corner of the entire globe. So yeah, a real big problem, and can cause some, significant damage to products. So yeah, anything basically that's animal derived, fabrics and furs, you can possibly get a problem with common clothes moth. And also with clothes moth, they do tend to be more attracted to items of clothing, for example, that are a little bit older. Maybe we've been wearing them for a bit longer, the body oils and odors that are associated with that. And you think of, brand new manufactured natural fibered clothing, it's going to have certain manufacturing processes and chemicals possibly present, so it might not be as attractive. But as we wear these clothes and use these rugs and walk on these carpets for longer periods of times, obviously that would degrade, wear away, and it would become a lot more attractive to the common clothes moth. So I've spent all that time on the first slide, blimey. Let's move on to just a little bit more about, again, it's not entomological detail here, just a little bit of a reminder, a little bit of a a visual identification and how it's easy to do so. We're all very familiar with it. You can certainly see the gingery brownish hairs on top here, quite large eyes as well. If you get it under a microscope, they're pretty interesting to look at. No distinctive markings. You can get a case-bearing closed moth, which have slightly different patterns on the wings, but generally, certainly from a distance and for our identification purposes, they're very this sort of goldy, shiny, silvery gold color. 5 to 8 millimeters. They only fly when it's warm, and then that's kind of really most insects. They do prefer the warmer weather. As we know, as soon as spring and summer comes around, things will increase. But because this a lot of the SPIs and textile moths that we deal with are I say internal pests. Again, they're on the clothes and the furnishings that we have in our houses, so they could be active all year round. But there's no doubt about it. This time of year, they will increase in numbers, and you probably will see an increase in call-outs. They do tend to shun the light as well and hide in dark places. So they're quite common under sofas and chairs and cabinets. A lot of the time, if there's moth activity, but you can't sort of see, you can't see where the activity is right away, then just start moving, sofas out the way, start moving cabinets out the way, and you might start seeing that, oh yeah, I can see the damage now. I can see the damage appearing and those tracks that those larvae are leaving behind. Okay, a little bit more about the larvae and what happens there. So the egg larval pupae, it's a complete metamorphosis. This is the case for all of these moth species that we're going to be talking about here. So it goes through that complete cycle, that complete metamorphosis. 3 to 10 months is the total life cycle. Now, any invertebrate training that you do or reading up on invertebrate species, temperature and humidity is so important for the longevity of the metamorphosis or the life cycle and how long these will live. And again, 3 to 10 months, that's a long span, isn't it? But it just depends how quickly that insect goes through this stage here. So the egg, larvae, pupae. So as you can see, 1 to 5 weeks to hatch the egg. Once that egg has been laid, it will hatch in 1 to 5 weeks. It will depend on temperature. It will depend on humidity, all these things. If it's particularly cold and maybe the egg is laid in an area where there's not much heat getting to it, it may take longer to actually hatch out. And again, once they do, the larvae, again, similar situation. It will depend on temperatures and food source. So, of course, the larvae won't really be where it is unless there is a food source, because the adult will only lay that egg near a food source. Of course, they want to look after its young, its larvae. They want to lay that egg on a material that's suitable for its feeding pleasure. So that larvae will carry on depending on its metabolism and the temperatures and the humidity there. They'll feed away, go through stages of growth, and 2 to 7 months they'll pupate. And that, again, 2 weeks to 2 months, all dependent. They can overwinter sometimes. They can lay dormant for some time, but generally, again, because they're inside homes, they're inside heated properties and buildings, generally they will go through that cycle. And again, 2 weeks to 2 months. So it's quite, when customers are talking to you about these things, they do often ask, oh, well, how long does it take for them to, die out naturally if we were to do it that way? You can say, well, 3 to 10 months. Not that they will die out naturally unless you deal with the source, but we'll go on to that in a bit. Adults are short-lived, as with most of the moths. It can be days, maybe a week. It's not very long at all. As long as they got enough time to lay those eggs on the food source, they're happy. Larvae do all the damage. We know that, don't we? In pretty much every species of moth that we deal with in the pest industry, it's the larvae that do the damage. Females generally don't fly. Males do occasionally. So, the temperature needs to be a lot warmer for them to do that. But if you notice and you look back on your experience with closed moth, you see them a lot of the time. They're resting. They're at rest, either on the floor, or on the walls, or on the ceilings. And very, occasionally you'll get them fluttering, but it's only the males that do that, and that's them seeking out a female to carry on the fertilization. Okay. Well, that's common clothes moth. As I said, it's, because we're doing 3 species, we've got to keep it short. But hopefully that gives you a good idea and a good reminder of what we're talking about with clothes moth. We'll talk about control options once we've gone through these other 2 species. So do wait for that. Okay, so Indian meal moth, Podia interpactella, quite really common. I remember dealing with this many times. The most common occurrence I would have is a call for moths in a domestic property or a kitchen in an office block, and you'd open up a cupboard and out come some adult moths, and you think, yep, there's definitely a product or a cereal box of some description in here that's obviously infested, and need to deal with it. So cocoa beans, cereal, peanuts, dried fruits, all these things they could attack, depending, a whole wide variety. The larvae are surface feeders. Most of the damage to stored products occurs when the larvae spin a massive amount of silk that accumulate fecal pellets, cast skins, eggshells, things like that. That's where the contamination comes of this food product. We were just talking about common clothes moth, and they're a textile pest. They won't cause this issue with stored food products, whereas Indian meal moth, stored food product, and SPI, really important, and that contamination that they cause just from being present is a massive issue, let alone also the actual physical damage that they do, and they may render product through the manufacturing line unfit for sale, which is an obvious massive impact on the economical status of import, export, things like that. Fumigation is a big industry for things like this, a specialist area of work. I'll touch on it later, but I won't be talking about the details of it. Of course, it's not the place. But really common, as I said, kitchen cupboards, pantries, cupboards in offices. You've got a kitchen there, or something's been left for a long period of time. Normally, when you possibly go to a local shop or supermarket, you buy a packet of cereal or some dried fruit or peanuts, and you take it home. And if you're unfortunate enough to have bought something that has a larvae of some description, or an adult moth that's got caught up in the manufacturing process, and you've taken that home with you, or your customer's taken that home with them, then that's going to be probably the source of their problem. It could also be a neighbour, if there's any multi-occupied buildings, possibly. They might have found their way in from a neighbouring issue. It's not always the products that we buy from shops that we should blame, but that's certainly where they're going to be feeding. But really distinctive. I'm going to pop onto this next slide here. Just about see we're probably all very familiar with that very distinctive band of paler colouring on their wing. Really, really distinctive, a good one to identify, and quite pleasant to look at, I personally think. Again, it's often seen flying around kitchen and food stores. The larvae live within the food of choice. They can penetrate packaging as well. So, if you've got a very light, thin packaging material that, they can use their mandibles to chew through, they can then certainly get access to that packet, even if they're on the outside of the inner packaging. Again, spin webbing, like I mentioned before, this is where a lot of the contamination comes, the webbing and the frass that's created, and the larvae themselves, the pupae cases. It's a real issue, and can cause some real significant, as I said, financial impact on those companies that are manufacturing these products, let alone domestic situations, and relatively straightforward normally to deal with, and maybe doesn't have a massive impact. It's a bit annoying, and can be, some people do have fears of moths, actually. My colleague Kat was telling me earlier, one of her friends saw one of the images that we'd done for this webinar today, and didn't particularly appreciate the image because of a fear of moths that they have, and it is certainly present. So we need to take that into account and be sensitive to that. Even though it might just be a few moths flying around a kitchen, it can cause some people considerable distress. Fortunately, domestic kitchens are normally quite easy to deal with. We'll go on to that later. And also the larvae. So I remember very distinctively doing, moth jobs and going out and seeing the Indian meal moth themselves, thinking, oh yeah, brilliant. I know where the problem is. It's in that cupboard. We can deal with it. But on the wall there, they say, well, I can see the larvae crawling on the walls, and that's them moving away. Or sometimes on the inside of the cupboard, you'll see them crawling up the side, and that's them moving away from the food source because they're nice and full. They're nice and gone through their larvae stage, and they think, oh, I'm ready to pupate now, so I'm going to leave the food source and do my thing and pupate and get ready for that adult stage. So yeah, we do that. If you get into domestic kitchens or commercial kitchens and you see larvae on the walls, obviously it could be flies as well, but if you've seen some moths flying around, it could be the Indian meal moth larvae moving away. And again, they pupate in a silk cocoon in cracks and crevices. So cracks and crevices really important for when we get to that control stage. Okay, great. Just some images here that was kindly supplied to us by a member, Kelly Farrant at Pest Tech Limited. We put out a little social media request and said, oh, we need some images for the webinar. And Kelly provided some. So this is the larvae of the Indian meal moth. As you can see, that wonderful silken tunnel there. Got a 20 pp. So that was a great little additive there. You can see the size. And also here is the pupate cases where they crawled away, they pupated into that silk cocoon as protection. And yeah, fantastic images. Thank you, Kelly, for that. Great. Okay. Last little bit then, again, just to cover a little bit of biology. So again, complete metamorphosis. A life cycle can be completed generally in 27 to 300 days. Okay, I've done it in days rather than weeks and months here. Why have I done that? You spice it up a bit, make you think about it, maybe add it up. But yeah, 27 to 300 days. So we're going up to possibly a year. It could take to go through that egg, larvae, pupae cycle. Again, same reasons. A lot of these reasons are all applicable to all species. Temperature is important, humidity is important, food source is important. That, without doubt, they are so important. And any effect or any change or any lack of one of those will affect massively the rate of production and the successfulness of production in any insect. And certainly with moths. A single female can lay up to 400 eggs after mating, so that's quite a few. The mating and laying of eggs usually occurs 3 days after the adult emergence. Oh, my computer is doing funny things. Sorry, there we go. Disappeared. Don't you like technology? Yeah, and the eggs are usually can be laid singly or in clusters, and they're generally oviposited or generally laid directly onto the larval food source. Again, lay it on the soil. Why wouldn't you? They want that larvae to be successful and to get enough food for their survival, so they're going to lay that egg near the food source. The eggs hatch in about 7 to 8 days at 20 degrees centigrade. Usually, again, most insects, especially moths, 20 to 30 degrees centigrade is an ideal temperature for them to be able to go through their cycles successfully and efficiently. That's a general rule. Over 10, 12 degrees Fahrenheit, Celsius is the minimum. Again, most insects, anything below sort of 12, 13 degrees centigrade will have a real effect on insects being able to successfully go through their metamorphosis. So 20 to 30 is ideal. And then upon hatching, the larvae begin to disperse and within a few hours can establish themselves in a food source. The larvae can complete their development in 6 to 8 weeks. At temperatures, again, 18 to 35. These are real, we've got 20 to 30, 18 to 35. 20 to 30 is ideal. Anything above 30, maybe they start to decrease again because it's getting a little bit too warm for them. A little bit affects their metamorphosis rate. So the larvae do have instars. The number of larval instars again varies from 5 to 7, depending on the food source and the temperature. And the pupal stage can last from 15 to 20 days. Again, at 20C is usually preferable, but can actually increase that to 70 degrees centigrade, and it'll only take 7 to 8 days. So yeah, it's interesting pests. Temperature, isn't it? Food source, temperature, environment, really, really important. Quite straightforward stuff. And like I said in the last slide, the larvae, when ready, will move away from that food source. Okay, great. So I'm going to go on to Endrosis sarcilitrella. That's the white-shouldered house moth. Pretty similar to the common house moth. They look slightly different. The common house moth is more one colour with speckles rather than this distinctive white-shouldered pattern here. Why have I chosen the white-shouldered house moth? Mainly because it feeds on, so the larvae will live on dried plant and animal debris, where it spins a silk, but that different, so animal and plant derivatives. So they could possibly cause a problem in textiles or, taxidermy, birds' nests, things like that. But they also can live on dried plant debris. So, it could be, these products that we're manufacturing, these stored product insects, it could be on both sides. So yeah, and I thought, I see an odd white-shouldered house moth in my house, 1, 2 a year maybe, doesn't bother me, it's not a problem. Bit of a, I sort of waft it out or get rid of it, but there's no infestation. It's just one of those occurrences, possibly from an old bird's nest that might have been up, in the attic from years ago, but again, hasn't caused me an issue. And a lot of people would have certainly come across white-shouldered house moth. Again, that they certainly do prefer more vegetable protein heavy diets, so they will certainly go for that. They're not as common. They're very common in birds' nests and such things, but we don't really associate them with damaging textiles, because it's a lot harder to access that food source, whereas things like birds' nests, it's very, very raw, very dense, very natural intended, so they'll get a lot easier access to birds' nests and the food they want, whereas textiles, maybe they're not as designed as well as the common clothes moth, but they can absolutely. So again, animal or vegetable plant sort of debris, but certainly vegetable protein heavy diet is what they prefer. Again, common in birds' nests. In terms of textiles, if they're left undisturbed for long periods of time, they could. And again, that's due to the, it's not as easily accessible to them, and they prefer the easier ones, the birds' nests. We actually found them, with larvae, for example. There's been reports, I say reports, quite a common thing from studies, that various scientific papers have reported that, for example, when you're turning your heating on in when it gets a bit cooler, we all vary, don't we? And what time of year we put the heating on. We always have a bit of a competition to see how long we can leave the heating off. But when we do, it can sometimes actually blow out some adult moths, possibly, that we think, well, where did they come from? And it's, they've been feeding on that fluff that's in the radiators. And again, brown house moth are quite similar to this species, not slightly different in some ways, but the general principles of why they're there and how to control them are the same. And again, sometimes it can be a simple nuisance and no more. But if they, like anything, usually how we define pests is when they are in numbers that are unacceptable, whether it be to human health or and economical, financial status in terms of the products and the things that we export, import, and manufacture. Okay. Right, great. Go on to some next bits here. Just a little bit of a, again, I don't expect you to read that small print, but it's just an example of the variety of food sources and where you could find them. So, peas and beans and corn and mixed feeds and seed potatoes, thatch on roofs as well. Thatched, I haven't dealt with really any thatched properties in my time, but I know some of you have. And, thatched properties, they're made of natural fibers. Some of them might be animal hair or wool that might be in there. It could be more plant related thatching. Again, I'm not a thatch roof expert, but these things, are natural, and it's great. Of course, it's fantastic, natural all the way. I love natural, but it can obviously attract unwanted and damaging pest species sometimes. So thatch roofs are certainly a problem there. A whole wide variety of pests you could get there, and fungi in trees, and possibly mouldy residues. But again, they're going into finer detail, not something we would necessarily have to worry about too much. Certainly fungi in trees, but just as an example. They do like a relative humidity of 80%. It's certainly preferred. Some may say it's needed, under debate, but yeah, the higher the humidity, say the better. 100% humidity is not necessarily that beneficial, but around 80%. And again, 20 to 30 degrees is ideal. It's a bit of a theme here, isn't there? 20 to 30 is an ideal temperature for all of these moths. Spring, summer in the UK, amazing. Now, just I didn't mention earlier, but something with these moths and common clothes moth, in other countries where it stays warmer all year round, as well as it is a lot warmer when it's supposed to be a lot warmer, i.e. the summer, you can get these species in, birds' nests that are outside in trees and such things. Maybe not in this country because of the humidity being too low and the temperatures being too low, or not consistently high anyway. We very rarely find that. It's usually in homes and houses or buildings when we get nests in cavities that you might get them in there. But yeah, in the wild, in other warmer countries, you certainly can get them. So just again, another little slide, just a little bit about the biology. So again, complete metamorphosis, 2 to 7 months, very similar to the common clothes moth. Eggs are up to 200 per female, near the food source. Like I said, there's definitely a theme here. It'll always be near that food source. The larvae are 2 to 5 months, migrate again away from the food when fully developed. There is a theme, isn't there? Food source, migrate away. They pupate in a tough silken cocoon. Again, very common theme. And these things, again, will certainly, if they're on any products or unwanted products that we're manufacturing or producing, or natural fibers, it can cause that contamination and that concern and that damage. And again, adults only live for a week. They've got this very distinctive fringe on the wing. I love that bit. More fringe than a country western singer. Love it. That's a cat's little input. Made me laugh. I liked it. Hopefully it's made some of you smile. But yeah, a lot of fringe here. If we go back, let me just go back to move me out the way. All I can see is me in that corner. Let's move me. There we go. Going to go back to this one here. When it's at rest and the wings are closed, you can see this fringe here. Quite distinctive, quite pretty, quite pleasant to look at. And then here on this image, when the wings are opened a little bit more, as you said, there's a lot of fringe there. So yeah, really, I think it's a favourite in the moth lovers world. Well, that's hard to say. Moth lovers world. These are good ones for you to look under the microscope at, because they're particularly pleasant. Good. Okay, blimey, how are we doing? So we're going to go on to a bit of control. Now, I am going to give you bit of a heads up. I will not be talking about products specifically here. I will not be giving you brand names. I won't be saying, oh, these traps are the best or those traps are the best, because, that's not really my place to do that. Your suppliers and your manufacturers will be able to talk to you about that. There are so many options out there. I say so many. There's a fair few options of monitoring traps and control strategies and techniques. I will cover them, but just as an overview for something to think, oh yeah, that technique, I'll have a look into that. And if it's product related, you can speak to your suppliers about it. They'll tell you what they've got. They'll tell you a bit about how you use it, etc. You read the labels, you read the technical instructions that come with it, and we're all happy. And obviously you can go on more detailed training courses. Certainly with these suppliers, they might talk about their products a lot more. BPCA courses where it would be a bit more generic and maybe more detailed, but I won't be talking about specific traps. So if there are any questions coming up anywhere that are, oh, Natalie, what trap do you recommend? I can't really answer it for you. So don't ask it. Speak to your suppliers and they'll be able to help you. Hopefully none of you are going to log off now and think, oh, well, that's what I wanted to know from Natalie, what traps that, she used to use, or who she thinks the members use and what are best. I can't. But there's people that can. So go and speak to them. Okay, great. Disclaimer done. Okay. So this is generally relevant to all species. And really, the general statement from me is that these are the top 3 things to do. And there is no one single thing that is more important than this. Find the source. That is undoubtedly, I would almost delete the rest of this presentation, say, just find the source. You'll sort the problem out. I can't say it enough. It is the most important thing. There is no magic wand. There is no magic pesticide or insecticide that you can spray on a carpet or spray in a cupboard that's going to magically get rid of the problem if that food source is still there. It might reduce it for a period of time. It might help out with it, but it's certainly 99% of the time will not get rid of that problem, and you'll have callbacks, or they'll come out to give you a call again the next year when the problem has exploded again. You have to find the source. So whether you do this by you talking on the phone, surveying, it's your responsibility as a professional to advise the customer that, ask the questions you need to ask them where they've seen them, what they think they've been infesting. Send me a picture of what the moth looks like, because it's quite important as well that you do have an adult moth to identify it. Now, a keen eye, you might be able to identify a moth species just by the larvae, but tell you something, I'm not confident to do that. I wouldn't be confident enough. An entomologist probably would be confident enough. But this is not what this presentation is about. And that's not who a lot of us are. We're pest management professionals on the front line dealing with distressed customers that want their problems solved. So, ask them these questions. Ask them to send you a photo of the adult moth. If they haven't got it, obviously you've got to go and do a survey. Up to you how you address that in terms of, bills and paying and charging, completely up to you. But you need to find that source. So many times I get calls where problems haven't been resolved, and it's because, just a spray treatment's been done. It's closed moth to spray the carpet, didn't really find where they were, or couldn't find any damage on the carpet, so I sprayed the carpets. Well, that food source could be up in the attic and a rolled up bit of carpet that you don't know about that's stuck in the corner. Or it could be for clothing, fancy clothing that hasn't been wrapped up properly, left somewhere. And actually it's that they're damaging, not the carpets or rugs. We might be preset to think or assume that common clothes moth just, go for rugs and carpets and, fancy rugs. So, we need to find it. Okay. And where you can, if there's, it depends what it is. I'm going to go into a little bit more detail now on the different species. But generally, survey it, find the source, address the source. So get rid of it, clean it, clear it, throw it away, whatever, depending on what the species is. And then good advice is always about, vacuuming really heavily, right down in the cracks, right down the crevices, getting those, tools off of the vacuum cleaner and getting it down there. And, especially if you've got pets, getting that out of cracks and crevices. I spend most of my time doing that. Really important to do. So, and then obviously, if there is an infestation in these areas, it's important to empty that vacuum bag. Okay, so just going to the species a bit more specifically. Yeah, that's right. So this is more for rugs, carpets, and other upholstery. Of course, it's different to maybe clothing. So we're talking about the bigger items here, the fitted carpets, the expensive rugs, and possibly other upholsteries. So pre-treatment quite really essential. If, again, this is assuming you've identified the species and it's common clothes moth, and the customer says, yeah, I can see some damaged areas under my sofa or whatever where they are. Great, okay, and you've done your survey and you're happy. So you say, look, the ideal way for us to get more ideal control is to do this vacuuming and clean the area. Because you want to take up as much dust and debris as you can. So any pest insecticides you use are going to lay better, stay active for longer. And also you're going to be saying to them, look, don't vacuum for some time once I've come and done my treatment. So of course, they will want to vacuum so that, they don't have to spend the next few days thinking, oh, I wish I'd vacuumed, my floor's a mess. So, a bit of treatment successful necessity, but also for the customer, that might be the last time they're going to vacuum for maybe a week or two. So obviously you're going to risk assess it and treat and advise on safety. What you use is up to you. Again, speak to you. There's so many products out there. If you feel an insecticide is necessary and you found where the source is, and yet we've done all the advice that we can and cleared up and got rid of anything we can, now we need to address this carpet or rug because it's not, got to the point where it's just unusable anymore. It's still usable, it's still in good condition. Let's get rid of these moths and choose whichever product you want to, but just risk assess it, treat it, and advise on the safety measures. So staying out of the room, etc., until it's dry, and giving them that safety advice in your treatment reports. Again, the hierarchy, there's different ones. Don't always just go, oh, that's the one I got in my van, I'll use it. Take it as an opportunity to have a look at other products out there. Maybe things with growth regulators or synergizers, I've worried about too much, but why go in for the hard sell, hard kill when you could use something a little bit more friendly on the environment and your pocket, possibly. But effective, read the labels, do the technical research on it and choose the right thing. But so pre-treatment, really important, risk assess it, select the appropriate insecticide. And in terms of visits, there's no legislation stating you must do this amount of visits for the technical success of getting rid of clothes moth. But doing one visit, not professional in our eyes, because a lot of that's your survey. You'll be finding out where they are, you'll be given good advice, and you might even be able to get a treatment done on that first visit if it's all been organized well. But you're not just not going to come back then. You're professional. You need to come back and you need to reassess it and go, right, how are things? How have you seen any more? Have you done the recommendation? Have you got rid of what we said? Or have we checked the attic to make sure there's no other food source up there for them? You haven't got any carpet that you've just stuck up. We all do it, don't we? You have a carpet laid and they leave you with some remnants of the bits they've cut off and you stick it in your attic or in your cupboard or under your stairs. So, really important that stuff's addressed. And really 3's recommended because it's just good practice. The first visit you do the pre stuff, maybe on the telephone, you go and do the treatment, you come back just to see whether or not it's been successful. And you might even put up some moth pots or some monitoring devices, some description. Again, I can't tell you which ones, can speak to your suppliers, but have that monitoring tool there, that early warning sign possibly going forward. And just as an FYI, so dry cleaning uses chemicals. It doesn't use high heat. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that side of things. So the dry cleaning process, I'm not technical in terms of dry cleaning, but it's chemicals that they use and it's not insecticides they use, of course. So that's not going to be a reliable way necessarily to deal with clothes moth on clothing and other small items, which we're going to talk about now. And I don't think the dry cleaners would be too happy either about having you go, oh, can you sort out my clothes moth for me and dry clean these? I don't know if they'd be too pleased. So yeah, in terms of other methods then, so freezing. So this depends really on density. Oh, I said it. On the amount of clothes you've got. If you've got a big pile of clothes like this compared to one jumper, you're probably going to have to leave it in that freezer for a little less or a little longer time, depending on how dense that packaging of clothing is. So generally 2 weeks is the general guide in terms of freezing at -18. So that's quite a long time. You might think, blimey, that's a long time. But, from research and looking around at scientific studies, it does look that, for the longer the better. And certainly if you've got a pile of them. But why not if they got the space? If they haven't got the space, do you know what? Maybe an idea. Maybe you buy a freezer, stick it in your garage or in your stores, and you can offer the service and say, look, I can offer to take your clothes away and I can put them in my deep freezer for 2 weeks and then I'll bring them back to you. Maybe a little extra offering there for your service, because not everybody has access to or the space to store a freezer that they can fit these clothes in. It might be full of lovely food and food, so they might not be able to fit it in there, so you could offer it. High temperature wash, so probably not, and the reason being, again, these are usually natural fiber clothing, and natural fiber clothing normally comes or can come at cost sometimes, and the washing instructions prevent you or the customer from being able to wash them at high temperatures. You've got to get it it's really over 52 to 57 degrees to reliably kill all stages. And of course, we know the settings on domestic washing devices are, I think 40 up to 60. So you don't really have a choice of in between. So you're going to have to wash it at 60. And not all clothes are going to be able to be washed at that temperature. So again, It's a discussion to have, but it may not be an option. In terms of, if there's a large scale problem, whether it's rugs or lots and lots of clothing, again, you can talk about other heat treatments. So, whether you've got bubbles that you can heat to certain temperatures, but this all really depends on the item that needs it doing to, because, damage to fibers and sensitivity, taxidermy, things like that, it can cause, damage. So only for an expert to advise on it, but certainly considered. Okay, but in terms of, clothing, other small items, freezing is really great. Maybe you can offer a service, and temperatures, in terms of high temperatures in washing machines, probably not, but have a look at the label. You never know. You can advise your customer to prevent this. So hang in plastic bags and covers. In terms of mothballs, old-fashioned mothballs containing naphthalene or parachlorobenzene were banned in the EU in 2008 because of the potential risk to human health. Both these chemicals can cause ill health by breathing in fumes over time, etc., and obviously a big risk to small children. And of course, on the domestic market, they don't read the labels of these things or take precautions. They just get it out the packet, chuck it in their wardrobe, and they think it's done, and that's an issue. So they banned them in 2008. There are mothballs on the market. I've never bought any, never probably will. Don't know a lot about the active ingredients that are in there. But as far as you're concerned, unless you're confident with them, you've used them and you've got some technical background on them, the customers can do what they want if they want to use them, but it's not something we generally tend to talk about. If an item's damaged extensively, it may be time to say goodbye. It can happen. Who wants to wear a jumper with holes all over it? Okay, good. So Indian meal moth then. Again, identified that food source, very important. I mentioned earlier about fumigators for large scale problems in feed. So any store product insect, whether it's, a biscuit beetle or a moth of some description, if it's large scale and you're in the manufacturing process and there's a big bulk of products that's infested, that's probably the time to get a fumigator in and then speak to somebody who can do it on a larger scale. Again, we can talk to you more about that if you need to. Again, clean out areas. So let's say domestic kitchen or an office kitchen where you've got moths, you've got a few larvae on the wall. You can see the Indian meal moth. Oh yeah, brilliant. They're distinctive colouring. Definitely Indian meal moth. You're going to looking through all them cupboards. You're going to open that cupboard, open this cupboard. What's that up there? Open. That's my key to any pest control is, open it, look in it, be nosy, ask questions. Find where you feel like, yes, this is where these moths are coming from. It's this box of cereal. It's this packet of dried fruit, whatever it may be. You get rid of that. I don't want to eat that. Of course I don't. I'm not doing anything with it. It's not expensive. Gone. Get rid of it. Out. Not just in the office bin that's on the floor or the customer's bin in the kitchen. Let's get it out. Whether you take it away or whether they just stick it in their outside bin or do whatever you want to do with it. Could even stick it in the freezer if you wanted to, but there isn't any need. Put it outside. UK temperatures are pretty unpleasant, so they'll probably die off naturally anyway. But get rid of the blooming thing. It will solve 80% of the problem. Get rid of that source. Okay, and then you can clean out the areas, vacuum out, empty the vacuums, wipe down. Cracks and crevices really, really important. If you feel that it is quite a big issue, maybe it's a little tiny shop or maybe a supermarket where they've stored and there's actually quite a large issue and a large amount of packaged materials or packaged foods that you've got rid of, then maybe a bit more intensity is required and survey and cleaning out and so on and so forth. And then really you want to put up some monitors. You might not even need to use an insecticide. It's not always needed. Remember, we've got to go on that hierarchy of, do I need to spray something here? Do I need to use something? Possibly not. So, cleaning it out, removing it, vacuuming it could solve the problem. And you think, do you know what? I think we've done a good job here without using insecticides. Let's get some moths, get some moth monitors, some Indian meal moth monitors, and come back next week and see what the crack is. You might have cracked it and not need to use insecticide, and everybody's happy. Okay. Again, for commercial customers with larger scales, certainly monitoring devices definitely needed, and domestic homes, a lot of the time it's recommended. Okay, running out of time here, so I need to get on to just a little bit more on Indian meal moth. So stock rotation, advise on stock rotation and check-in. Getting new things, open it up, check, fine, great, put it in a sealed container, fabulous. Early warning systems. So these will certainly be for your commercial customers that maybe you think, oh, they are storing or manufacturing or processing products here that are, sensitive to possibly SPI or moth problems. Get those early warning systems in. So monitors and traps you can check regularly. Again, bulk buying, check it when it comes in. Commercial customers, they'll hopefully have all this in place, especially dog food. It's not just your kitchen cupboards. If someone's got a dog and you think, oh, I can't, they seem to be fine in their cupboards, it could be actually that dog food, that dry dog food that's kept in the cupboard and been left there maybe for a month because they've bought a couple of packs, and you open it up and out come the Indian meal moths. So think about dog food as well. Okay. So we're going to go on to white-shouldered house moth. A relatively short piece here because, not always an issue. But when they're of substantial numbers, it can be indicative of poor hygiene or certainly birds' nests up in the, if you get, usually I say hoarder environments, but environments where the tenant's not particularly clean or carries out much housekeeping, and if they've got pets as well, if a substantial amount of pet hair is left uncleared and in cracks and crevices, it can cause problems. Again, general housekeeping, that's a general advice. If you've got vacuum a lot, you wipe things down, you haven't got any birds' nests, you generally won't get an issue with this species. So I mentioned that SPI, it can be a problem in some dried foods, possibly, or vegetable debris orientated with it, but it's less likely. But again, it'll be the same principle as any other species. Find the source of where they're feeding. If you can't find the source and you think this is such a large environment, it's a manufacturing plant or storage plant where you've got bags of cocoa or bags of beans or cereals, everywhere waiting to be shipped out, then that's when you get, comprehensive survey and monitoring processes in place, where you have traps and monitors in various locations around the whole site. And then, if you get 0 moths in that one over there, but this trap over here has got, I've got 30 odd moths in here. Great. I'm going to, keep my search to that area. I'm going to check those products in that area because, there's a lot of moths on there. So they're obviously frequenting this area and they're coming from a product that's in this area. Okay. So it's about trying to reduce your area of survey and inspection when you do get a problem. But again, birds' nests, they cause all sorts of problems, don't they, in terms of insects? So just, they need to get them removed, and that will help out with the problem. Have a look in the attic if it's domestic. Okay. I said residual insecticides can be applied, but really with any species, again, but with this species, where would you do this? Again, you can't just, willy-nilly, don't use that phrase very often, willy-nilly, love it, spray insecticides, think, oh, I've got some moths in here. There's a white-shouldered house moth on my wall, I'll spray the carpet. I mean, it's not going to do anything, okay? And I do see it more often than you would think, when people report things to us, and it can be tempting, but just no need. And it's just going to possibly invite problems for you and complaints from customers when you don't solve the problem. Okay. But again, you could look at labels, always check the labels. I'm not here to say, right, this product, you can treat those pests, and look at the label, speak to the suppliers, they'll help you. But certainly if you're ever in a roost space and you've got birds' nests and you're removing them for whatever species of insect, you've always got to consider things like bats and fire and safety. So, do you need to spray? Maybe you do, but just consider things like bats. And again, frequent vacuuming. It helps out in many, many ways. Okay. Applicable to all species. So this is just a quick rundown of, that really you should have an established approach. So, whether maybe you're going to go away and type up your own procedure for moth control, which can be quite generic. You can break it down into different species. You think, I over the last couple of years, I've had calls for, all these different species. Maybe you want to get a generic moth procedure in place so that when you get those calls, you've got it in your mind, right? This is what I need to do, customer. Maybe a bit of information you can send to them and say, this is what I need to do and why I need to do it. Because if I don't find the source, I'm not going to sort your problem out. Being honest with you, being straightforward, No one can complain. Write it down as well. Send an email with this information. Write a treatment report saying, this is the stuff I've told you. You need to do this and we need to find it. We haven't found it. So, I'm going to struggle to help you. But yeah, you may want to go away and get a procedure together. It could be a form of good communications and managing customer expectations. And if you don't find the source of the infestation, how can you assure your work? So having a little, even if it's just a one-pager process that you have typed up, and sometimes typing things up, having a document can really seal it in your memory of how you're going to do it. But visit one, which may be a phone call, it might not be a physical visit. They might send you loads of pictures and we'll be like, oh yeah, that's the common clothes moth, and I can see all that damage they've sent me on the rug or the carpet. Yeah, blimey, great. Okay, that's maybe your first visit, but it might also be a site visit to survey, because you've got to find it. Like I said, your customer might have found it for you. There's still some more questions you need to ask them about, okay, are we sure there's no other rug cut or carpet cut-offs in the attic? Or, are we sure that there's no other, like dog food sat in a cupboard you bought 2 years ago and you've forgotten about? You've still got those questions on the second visit. But, if you get it on the first and it's a phone call, then fine, as long as you get the information. And then once you've found it, of course, you can address it and treat it as necessary. Take it away, vacuum it, spray it, whatever you're going to do, whatever's safest, whatever's most professional in terms of your survey. And again, visit 3, it could be visit second physical visit, but in principle the third visit, ask how it's going, put monitors down, put traps down, and then visit 4 can be to check them. You could say to the customer, I'm going to put these down, you've bought them from me, there's no pesticide in them, depending on what ones you use, of course, but mostly sex pheromones or food pheromones. They could just let you know if they catched any, if you wanted to do that. Completely up to you, but I think important that you have that monitoring in place. Okay. Phew-wee. Okay. Hello. Yes, last one. So summary. Identify your moth. Consider and find the source. Okay. Because if you don't identify the moth, then how are you going to know what source to look for? Don't know. Can we? So identify the moth, get assistance, colleagues, BPCA, we can help you out. If we're not sure, because we're not entomologists, we know people that can. So, your suppliers, will a lot of the time also have that service for you. So get it identified, find the source that they're on, and of course, advise on that pre-treatment. Once you've done all those sort of pre-stuff, you can, look at your treatment. You could use an insecticide, read the label. It might just be a clean and out job, up to you to decide. Post-treatment monitoring, really important for you to really establish yourself as a professional. And I care. I'm not just here to do as little visits as I can and get away as quick as I can. That monitoring, really important. And it shouldn't be a one-visit job. Okay. Whew. There we go. Don't know why I didn't go too quickly there, that you couldn't audibly understand anything I was saying. I don't think. We've got 9 questions that have popped up, so let me stop sharing so you can see my expressions of, don't know. Okay, let's go. So I'm going to go at the top here. Think there any, not really on the agenda today, but anyway, are there any good trapping pheromones on the market for Galileo melina? I don't know that species, sorry to go. I don't know if you're working in another area of the world, but I hope the weather's nicer there than it is here. But I'm not familiar with that species. Apologies. I'm very, very selfish like that. I just think about the UK species. So sorry about that. Can't answer that one. Okay, that's just a comment. So case bearing moth in carpet. If this is the source, not everybody can replace their carpets. I mean, this is it. It's difficult, isn't it? So we don't have a magic wand, and if, certainly maybe heritage sites where normally they have their own internal team. Actually, there's some interesting books out there from heritage sites, but yeah, if they've got some particularly old and rugs and carpets that are extensively damaged, then it's up to them if they don't want to get rid of it. Absolutely not. Of course they can't. And then usually carpets, you do get to the infestation before it becomes an unsightly issue or a real problem that you need to get rid of it. And generally it's more clothing and things like that I think needs to be disposed of eventually, time to say goodbye, as we say, because again, they've bought these clothes for them to look nice on them and they've got holes all over them. Maybe it could be vintage, but they generally might need to get rid of them. But yeah, rugs and carpets, a lot of the time maybe they don't need to dispose of it. It's up to the customer, isn't it? You do your thing, you sort the problem, get rid of it. But if they want to keep it, absolutely. Thanks, Matt. How about using immobiliser chemicals in food production and food warehouse? What to consider if applying this method? So immobiliser, I know that's been used a lot for bedbug infestations because, again, it's non-toxic in terms of chemicals on the Koch spectrum. But yeah, certainly it can immobilise them, stop them from being able to move and do that later. But I'm pretty sure that's most effective on metamorphosis, incomplete metamorphosis, like when you've got those adult stages or nymph stages that resemble the adults, because it reduces that immobilization. I don't know if it works with larvae so much, which of course is the damaging species, and with again with the moths in terms of that contact. Of course, I would imagine it can cause immobilization, but yeah, I'm not sure. It's quite a new product, but I think that complete metamorphosis stage is maybe important. So yeah, a bit more to look into. Great question there, Denny. So we're not going to have time for all of these questions because we're meant to be ending now, but I won't. But I'll type any questions I don't get to. I'll type it at the end. But certainly that one, I'll leave it on there and I'll have a look into it for you and see whether or not that would be suitable. And again, where to consider applying it is where the problem is with any pesticide. Okay, so Jim here. Sorry about the previous question. I didn't see your previous question, but it's fine. How good could freeze spray be after vacuuming? Freeze spray, yeah. So freeze it. Those freeze sprays that you use, they are 100% reliant on direct contact. So that really answers your question. If you've got some moths there and you can get that direct contact, and it's on the label. I haven't read the label for these products, recently. Make sure that it hasn't got don't use it for this, or you can only use it for these species. But yeah, I mean, it will do its thing, but you need to get direct contact. Again, I know I've mentioned bed bugs and I seem to, but it's a popular insect that we deal with and a tricky one. It's great for that, but you've got to get direct contact. It's not we can just sort of spray it and hope for the best. Maybe in cracks and crevices you could, but again, it's that direct contact we need. So I don't see why not. And again, in terms of the larvae, certainly worth a go, worth using. And again, yeah, that's a really, these freeze sprays in terms of larvae, because with insecticides, of course, we know it doesn't affect the egg stage because it can't penetrate, and the pupae as well. So whether or not these would have an effect, and to me, freezing, for 2 weeks in a freezer will kill all life stages. So why wouldn't a freeze spray big one? So it's a great thing here for everybody. It's 270 viewers at the minute. Maybe some people to think, yeah, actually, let's have a look into freeze sprays. And again, Jim, I'm going to have a little look at that. This is good stuff, you see. I'm going to get my CPD point today as well. Thank you to all of you. Great. Well, I'm going to do 1:32. I'm over by 2 minutes. I'm going to go till 1:40, if you're all okay with that. Unless Kat pops up and says, no, Natalie, you can't, then I'll carry on because, that's me. Okay, so can you do a webinar on squirrels, please? Maybe, Trevor. I think we've got one on squirrels. I'd done a year ago. I'll leave that question on there and I'll give you the link to it. I'll send the link out. I might do a new one. We'll see. Okay, so why the larvae of the marmorated? Is that the marmorated stink bug you're talking about? That can be seen. Oh no, the Indian meal moth. Sorry. I don't know why I've got the stink bug on my mind. Why larvae of the Indian meal moth can be seen on the wall. So, Denny, I'll probably come to that a bit later on, but yeah, I didn't mention that. It's just the fact that they're moving away from the food source, like a lot of them do. So they'll be feeding, they think, right, I'm nice and full now, I'm going to go and pupate and have a little snooze, and they'll move away from the food source. And so I do that. I don't want to be sleeping in the kitchen, so I always migrate up to my bedroom. So similar thing. That's what they want to do. Okay. Are the moth killing cassettes any good? I.e., would they assist in wardrobes, etc., between treatments and properties which regularly suffer from clothes moth, for example? Martin Rogers, what are these killing cassettes? Sounds like something from the 90s, little cassettes we used to get. I don't know what the killing cassettes are. Maybe someone can put a comment down and give me an idea. I'm guessing similar to the mothballs that I mentioned, but more professional use. But again, I'm going to have a look at that. Blimey, it's been like 3 questions now that I wasn't just telling you. Makes it interesting, doesn't it? So yeah, I'm not sure what killing cassettes are. Again, I'm going to leave your question on there, and when I type some up at the end and pop them out, I will give you a more definitive answer. Okay. From Aldo, so I think more of there is a question. So the past 2 years, I have found textile moths feeding from synthetic underlay and carpets. Why, if no natural fibres are within? So first thing, clothes moth may have found a natural fibres that are within it. They say about the underlay or the carpet, maybe there are some natural fibres. Now, the other thing is, which is really weird, that I was reading this the other day. So, when I'm not going to remember. So there was a paper, a study done, and it was very recent, I think even 2021, that creating synthetic feeding or synthetic materials for clothes moth to feed from, for studying purposes. And, it's things like glucose and, blimey, there was a few different chemicals that they put together to create a synthetic food source that the moths were happy to feed on. So what I'm getting at there's no detail that's particularly direct there, is there? But the principle of, maybe what is present there is actually okay for the moths to feed on. I mean, they will be found there because there is something they want to feed from, full stop. Now, it could be something really kind of, actually, after some more investigation, we found that underneath that floor, some floorboards, and there was actually some, bird's nest or something natural that was under there. And it just looked like they were causing, an issue through this synthetic underlay and carpets. But there must be something in there they want. But, they won't feed from it unless there's something in there one. Or it could be a different species. Could be a different species textile moth that's got a different. If you, Aldo, by all means, speak to your suppliers or come back to us and send us some photos of it and talk about it in more detail, we might be able to help, because that sounds interesting. But unless that food source is there, they won't do it. What's the best way? So this is from Carl. What's the best way to check incoming bulk goods for moths? Check incoming bulks, so it's going to be a relationship thing. It's going to be a communication thing between yourself and the customer, and they will have as much responsibility as you. You can advise, again, it depends what the bulk is. I know certainly with certain beetles, you have I say subterranean, that's what I call them, subterranean monitoring devices that you can stick into grain, and that will monitor, basically the insects, the adult bugs will, from their moving around, will fall into this trap, and you can check it intermittently and go, blimey, we've got biscuit beetles. But in terms of moths, it's going to be a visual inspection. You can have, if they're getting regular deliveries of bulk products into a store, for example, you can have these, monitors up that you check weekly, monthly, whatever your agreement is with them, whatever your contract. I mean, I would say if it's a regular thing where things are coming in and out all the time, I would say weekly minimum, that, these moth traps that are going to be up in the structure in the factory where this product is coming in, can be monitored regularly, so that you think, we haven't had a product for 3, 4, 5 weeks, and all of a sudden you get a big delivery or something, and then the numbers go up and you think, okay, that delivery obviously had a problem. So that can be your side, but your customer also needs to have their own quality checks in place, that when that product comes in, there's a visual check. There's a routing around, you can dive in there. Don't dive in there. Visual checks. So visual checks and traps are really the best way, depending on the species. Again, is such a wide variety of stored product insects that can cause problems. So, you need to see the history of the site, see what species they are, and then get the right monitoring device by speaking to your suppliers, and maybe you'll have a variety of them. But this is all, your customer needs to be aware that you have to have regular visits on these things. Or you give your customers some training and they can do the checks and call you when there's a problem. But usually in bulk situations, if they do get a product in a bulk bag of cocoa, with SPI, more with closed moth, you can do sexual pheromone treatments, SPIs. There might be some indirect treatments that you can do, but a lot of the time, if you've got an infested product, it needs fumigation, and that's a whole nother story. We'll do one more, and then before I get told off, we'll have to shoot off. And see a few of you are just dropping off. Still got 240 of you, so that's great. Thank you. Okay, Danny, so could heat treatments work for closed moth in a hotel environment where 100 to 400 rooms have activity? Oh, that sounds like a big problem, Danny. Oh my God. Okay, so I mean, no. Closed moth, if they're damaging carpets and rugs, and if you've got a room that you think, right, I'm going to heat this up and kill these insects. I mean, insects are going to be susceptible to high heat for a period of time, over 57 degrees. Normally they do it. I get varying feedback on how long they do it for, but at least a couple of hours, I believe, at the high temperatures. But the important thing is that the right areas get to the right temperatures. If you've got cracks and crevices and beds in rooms on carpets where there could be larvae and you're heating that room, then what's to say that this area here that you're monitoring has got to 57 degrees, but that area under that bed over there is only at 40, then you're not going to get that balanced control. You might kill stuff that's here, but all this stuff over here, all these larvae or moth over here are going to be like that. Oh, it's quite warm in here, and that's it. So it's certain items, possibly, if they're suitable for treatment, i.e. the product's not going to be damaged, the clothing, the material's not going to be damaged, then great. But it's certainly a bigger discussion. But if you want to have a chat about that 100, 400 rooms, have an activity, then we're always happy to have a chat and talk it through. Good. I've gone 11 minutes over, actually. I think it's a record. So I did warn you all at the beginning. It was a long one. I really, really appreciate you all coming along today. As I said, I will get off these questions. I've got 8 more to do. I haven't got to. So I will get to those new ones, and I'll answer in more detail the ones that we weren't quite sure of, so the freezing, etc. Okay. I'll do a bit of research. And again, I'm going to claim my CPD because I'm going to be doing some research. Okay, wonderful. Have a fantastic day, and I will hopefully see you all virtually or otherwise very soon. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.